Speaking about great to eat, this season has been delicious for Texas and Texas fans. We got our friend first ever, Joe, you're the first ever Texas guy officially that we've had on Inside Texas on 3. They do a fantastic job over there. First off, thanks for joining us. And if you were going to rate the meal, the 2024 meal for Texas fans, are you giving it a Michelin star? Maybe 2, maybe 3?
I'll give it 2. It's funny you mentioned that because Michelin just showed up in Texas, and I know what they're good at with tires, they're good at with food too. I give it 2 stars. I think, but it's got the chance once the rest of the courses come through, maybe to earn that 3rd one.
And when you look at this team, and we had Rusty Manziel on from Georgia earlier in the week, they're expecting to see even more Arch Manning than what we've seen recently. And I don't think it's just because Quinn's ankle was banged up. I know y'all attached that bionic leg to him or whatever that worked out in the game against A&M. How much Arch Manning are you expecting to see this week? Is there going to be an extended package? Have you heard anything about, hey, we're going to give this guy some run?
I bet it looks pretty similar to what happened with the A&M game. I think it was only, 4 snaps. Now, granted, one of them was that first touchdown in the rivalry in 13 years, which is going to be a great piece of trivia, along with Arch Manning being the starting quarterback for Texas in their first SEC game. But that seemed to be more of it was utilized for red zone because, Quinn Ewers is a little bit hampered. He seems fine enough when it's between the 20s. Things break down in the red zone. And as we saw, Quinn Ewers fumbled in the red zone or close to it. So I think that's more of a special situation thing. And obviously they didn't deploy every aspect of it too. Arch didn't throw the ball, just had that 16-yard run, had a couple negative runs. There's more to it. And I think they were obviously showing that for Georgia, but also saving some for Georgia as well.
Do you have any updates on the injury situation on the offensive line for Texas? Because they gave up 7 sacks in the first game against Georgia, 10 tackles for loss, I think, and it needs to be all systems go. I don't care how Georgia played against Georgia Tech. Do you feel like nobody's 100%? You stop being 100% when you're being born or after you're born, well, or while you're being born, depending on how it goes. But do you have an update kind of on the offensive line and where they're looking?
Yeah, the big one you're asking about is Kelvin Banks, the left tackle. He had a very tough day against Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, those guys, as did the whole offensive line. And he got, people will say rolled up on, but I've seen rolled up ons that are a lot worse than what happened to Kelvin Banks. Was in a boot, was listed as questionable or either questionable or probable. Had a lot going on yesterday with signing day. Sark talked today as part of a SEC teleconference and said that he practiced. Sark's pretty coy. He doesn't say what practice entails. It could have been picking up pads and giving it to Trevor Gooseby, who played in his place and played extremely well against Texas A&M. But it could be putting on the helmet and taking part. We're trying to figure that one out. But this is a team that if they want to reach their goals, definitely would like to have Kelvin Banks back there and not have to rely on Gooseby to go against, Walker and Williams and even guys like that Texas recruited, like Jonel Oguero and a few others, Damon Wilson. So that'll be one to watch. I'll be looking for that not only in the injury report or student athlete availability report tonight, tomorrow night, and even Saturday as it hits lunchtime and game time.
Just a quick follow-up before I get to Cone on that. Do you think it would be smart, and do you think, and again, I know it's your first year in the SEC, and Texas fans want everything, and I understand that every fan wants everything. Would it be smarter if he's 65, 70% just to hold him because you guys are in the playoff, or to go ahead and take that risk and play him to try and win the SEC championship? What would Joe Cook do?
Here's the thing. I try to think about what the gladiators on the battlefield think. And if it's like, well, I've got this rocket launcher, but this 22 is pretty accurate.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and use the rocket launcher if it can get the job done. Maybe a little, I don't know, life and death is a little bit different. But when thinking that way, Sarkisian thinks about how do you win the game in front of you? How do you win on the field of battle? They're competitors. They may not have this, let's think too far ahead mentality. And I think we've seen that with how they deploy Quinn Ewers, especially in the games that matter, Oklahoma, Georgia, even going to when he wasn't looking great in some other games, they've used him. So I think the thing to do is to try to get him in and get him playing well, because, hey, if you beat Georgia, then you have a much more extended break. You're off until New Year's Eve instead of having to play 10 days later. It's a risk you have to take, but it's football. It's a gladiator sport. I think there's trust in Trevor Gooseby, especially after what he did against Texas A&M and some of their defensive ends. But I think if you can put your first rounder back out on the field, you do so.
I agree with that. Look, with those analogies, David, he's going to fit right in.
Oh, you're going to do just fine, Joe. I know you don't want to think about the prospects of Texas losing the SEC championship game, but let's say that happens. You played Georgia twice, you lost to them twice. There have been a lot of criticisms about Texas's schedule this year, which is crazy considering you came into the SEC and you played Michigan on the road, but it's the reality of the situation. Texas loses the SEC championship game. Where do you think they would fall in the college football playoff rankings based off what you've seen from the committee so far this year?
I'm going to assume an Oregon win to go along with it. I don't think they go further than 5. From what the committee said, they don't really want to move teams up as a result of not playing. Now, granted, here's the thing. I feel like Notre Dame's going to be that. They're going to get that 5 just because of the way the rankings, the seedings, all that work out. So I guess, looking at individual numbers is maybe a fool's errand considering what Notre Dame's status is with this 12-team playoff. If they lose, they're getting a home game. I feel very, very confident in that. I don't see any reason to drop a team from 2 all the way to 9 or anything like that, or to the 9th seed because of how the rankings work out. So I feel really confident in a home game. And, that's part of what makes this exciting. There are positives, there are negatives to the 12-team playoff, but one of the true positives is these highest stakes games, maybe ever, in some of these home locations, these home stadiums. And you can expect that if Texas doesn't get the bye and they have to play at home in Austin, then it'll be a pretty rocking time at DKR.
I think you're right. What's the one thing Texas has to do this Saturday to avoid Georgia really jumping out to an early lead and having such a dominant performance again this year?
They have to hang on to the football. I know people look at Trevor Etienne's stat line and saw, 3 touchdowns, 87 yards. Well, those drives that he finished in the end zone all started on Texas half of the field or pretty close to it. And a lot of that had to do with Quinn Ewers throwing picks and fumbling the ball. Even Arch Manning fumbled the ball. Or Quinn Ewers just threw 1 interception, but he had fumbles. Arch had fumbles. Those 3, in minus territory turnovers are what gave Georgia short fields, because there was really only one lengthy drive that Georgia went on. And to their credit, it was the one I think that made it 30-15. Other than that, the Georgia Bulldogs would get maybe into field goal range and then hit those field goals. You had 18 points from Etienne, you had 12 points from Peyton Woodring. And I think if you go with the old coach's mantra of every drive ending with a kick, that game looks a lot closer. I'm not saying it's different, but it's definitely closer. Instead, the Longhorns turn it over 4 times, have 3 lost fumbles, and Georgia gets to operate in some short fields. And that's not a team, even when Carson Beck's not at his best, that the 10 around them aren't going to let, short fields, 40-yard fields go unpunished. So that's the key to me, is hanging on to the football. As we saw, the turnover battle was 4-3 last time. Nobody wanted to seem to do it, but that 4 being greater than 3 was a difference.
Well, that's why I keep saying the most underrated position in this game, and it's not sexy, it's not flashy, is the punt team. Especially after Texas got that punt blocked against A&M last week. That's something they've really got to shore up. Whoever wins the net punt average in this game is going to control the field position. I expect the turnovers to be down because they were so bad last time, and these teams are really good at adjusting and moving on. Whoever wins the net punt average, plus whoever pins the other inside the 15 the most, I think they're going to win the football game.
God, you were a special teams coach, weren't you?
Special teams,
it's
special
just
times.
oozing out of you. Well, Joe, I want to ask you this. We've seen this as a different type of Georgia team this year, maybe not against y'all, but the last couple of weeks against Georgia Tech and UMass, that will give up big yardage on the run. And the way y'all dominated Texas A&M at the line of scrimmage, if you're Texas and you have that headset on and you're sarked for this game, are you pounding at Georgia for 4 quarters?
I'm trying to see if that will work this time. After the Georgia game, and Steve Sarkisian's even talked about this in the past 10 days or so, they made an emphasis like, guys, we got to find at least one of our run schemes that works. And they found it with kind of running that wide zone play. And Quintravian Wisner, who basically went from a committee member to committee chairman has done a great job at the running back spot. You saw him bounce off tacklers, keep moving forward against Texas A&M. The offensive line was getting 3 or 4 yards of push seemingly every play against an A&M defensive line that gets a lot of praise, but when you run right at them, they have struggled, and Texas did that pretty well. I'm looking at stats from the first game. Texas rushed the ball 27 times for 29 yards, and I know that includes sacks in college.
Yeah.
Still, that's not, I think sack adjusted, it only got to like 60 or 70, so it wasn't anything special. But after they played Georgia, they were able to run the ball pretty well against Vanderbilt, took care of business against Florida, obviously, had pass and run there. Arkansas, they bled the clock. Kentucky, they ran all over. And then A&M, they ran over. So they feel like they found something. And I know that that Georgia front is formidable, but so are some of the other fronts in the SEC. So is Florida's. There's a lot of 350-pounders on that Florida front. Deion Walker was still there. Arkansas had Landon Jackson, and Texas A&M had their front. So there's probably some confidence in Sark and in that offensive line that they can get that going. If they're able to do that, then all those guys I kept talking about earlier, like Michael Williams and Damon Wilson, it's a little bit tougher for them to start going after whoever's playing tackle. If you can get even just no negative plays, that would be a big positive. I know everybody wants 4 yards of carry, 5 yards of carry, but even if you're just not going backwards and setting up 3rd and 7 instead of 3rd and 12, that would help Texas a lot, and they're going to look to the run game to see if that'll happen.
Yeah, Sark's balanced. He's going to gut you like a fish.
All right, let's go to KC. KC, we got some questions here for you, Joe. Hashtag Ask Joe. If Texas makes it to the Natty, what opponent do you think would be the toughest matchup for them?
Oh, man. I'm trying to think of the bracket in my head. It's hard not to look at the team they're facing Saturday. I know the committee would probably try to put them on opposite sides. So that one might be one to consider. Let's see if Texas wins and Ohio, or if Texas wins and Oregon wins, that puts them 1-2. It's hard not to think Oregon, considering what they have on their defense. And Dylan Gabriel, I know it's a different team, but he found a lot of good success against Texas last year. That's a team that seems built similar to the Longhorns. Looking elsewhere, I'm trying to think of some of the SEC teams in there. I'm not afraid of Indiana, although I'm glad that they have had the season they have. Notre Dame, maybe their defense, and now that they seem to finally get a little bit more going on offense and have a good special teams unit. That one may be, if they come together and meet, that would be one of the lowest scoring games I can recall. But you're number 2 for a reason, and that's because you've accepted all comers, you've taken them all on, you've only lost to one, and it's because you put out your worst performance. Other than that, basically every other team is thinking it's like, oh, how do we get past Texas? How do we defeat a team that seems to have so many strengths? And when you're thinking about that, you're at a new level of the sport, not something we've been used to talking about when it comes to the Longhorns. But to me, it's Oregon, just because they're 12-0 for a reason. Yeah. They're in the Big Ten title for a reason. They've got balance. They've got a great roster, and they're a team that can just beat you in multiple ways.
All right, let's go to a $3 donation from I'm Horned Up. What's up, man? Appreciate the donation. He says, Joe, with our offense as good as they are with what Sark does, what do you think makes this year's team's defense so good? Is there anything special you see?
I think it's just the ability of the secondary in running various types of, coverages just to not get beat. You may be able to get like a 20 or 30-yard throw, but you're only getting one of those a drive. And if not, and you're getting a pass breakup, you're getting an interception, you're not getting just extra yardage on this Texas secondary. And it's a lot of veterans. There's only one true sophomore in the mix, and it's Malik Muhammad on the field side. You got a likely Thorpe Award winner, and Jade Barron playing one corner.
He's nice.
Former walk-on and Michael Taft playing safety. And then there's 3 Austinites in the secondary. Clemson transfer Andrew Makuba at another spot, and then Jalen Gilbo playing nickel. All those guys are great at communicating. They understand defenses, and they tackle really well as well. So it's just really hard to find big yards through the air against this Texas defense. And when you've got guys who can cover for 2, 3, 4 seconds longer than most, a pass rush that features a young 5-star like Colin Simmons, star transfer like Trey Moore, and some fifth-year, grown men in the defensive trenches like Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton, who had a big game. It's going to all work together in a way that it hadn't done for Texas in a while. And I think it really does start in the secondary, and that'll be important again Saturday because of what Carson Beck has seemingly been able to do through the air.
Yeah. Well, Joe, you definitely lived up to your last name. Somebody cooked here. We're going to have to get you back on. I know Texas is going to continue to play. They're going to be in the playoff. Please tell everybody where they can find you guys' work. You do a fantastic job over there. On3 does a great job in general. But can you tell everybody, our audience, where they can find you?
Yeah, we're over at InsideTexas.com, part of On3. You can get a 7 days trial for just $1. And we're at Inside Texas basically everywhere else. X, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, I think, is Inside Texas Football. That's the only different one. So we're all over. If you search Inside Texas, you'll find us.
Well, man, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Gentlemen, appreciate y'all.
Appreciate it, Joe.
Hey, everybody out there on YouTube. Just, again, want to tell you guys how much we appreciate you. Going to agree some, we're going to disagree some. But at the end of the day, you're here, and without you, there is no us. Having said that, if you hadn't subscribed already, please do. If you have, find somebody else to introduce them to the show, because y'all know, once you're in the trust tree, there's no leaving.